Later. Welcome, everybody. Let me just switch the gallery view here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Britta Cabanos, and it says in the little box in the corner, Janine Ballone. But my name is Britta, and I am moderating this on behalf of Janine and the World Collective. I am the founder of Inside Fashion Design, and super excited to be moderating this event today. 3D design as a creative catalyst. And there's so many exciting things happening in the world of digital and 3D. And so very happy to have these special guests that are going to share their work and tell us more about what they're doing in the world of 3D. We have Tony Murray, who is a designer and educator, and he has to.mu.lab, which is his website. So you can find that after. And then we also have Christie L, who's joining us from London. She's a graduate of Central St. Martin's and doing a lot of work in the 3D space. She is an XR artist. And they will share some more about their backgrounds. And I will monitor the chat. It will save some time after for Q&A. And, so feel free to ask a question at any point. I can either interrupt if needed when they're going through their things, or we can also save it for afterwards too. So there'll be plenty of time to ask them lots of questions. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off with Tony, and I will pass it to you to just dive right in and start sharing all the great work you're doing. And I will change the view here so we can see your presentation.
Great. Thanks, Britta. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the presentation. So this is 3D design as creative catalyst. And thanks for the introduction, Britta. I'm Tony Murray. I have a design practice called to.mu.lab, which is really just my name. I'm a designer and educator at California College of the Arts, where I teach in the fashion department, and I teach digital tools for fashion, conceptual fashion, and emerging technology for fashion applications. So an overview of what we're going to talk about today is a brief introduction on what is 3D design for fashion, then go into 3D design as a workflow hub, and then really the presentation is going to focus on 3D design as creative catalyst, and then launch over into, I'll hand it off to Christie Lau to just show how you can apply 3D fashion in a lot of different areas, and then we'll come back together for a Q&A. So what is 3D design for fashion? And I see Miguel is in the audience here. Did a great presentation a couple months ago with World Collective, introducing 3D design or digital product creation in the fashion industry with a couple great commercial applications. We had the founders of Trapdoor and Ventana. So I'm going to give a brief overview of what it is and then what you can do with it, more from a creative point of view rather than commercial applications, though anything that is creative, of course, is marketing, communications, fashion storytelling has commercial applications. So I think the easiest way to start is to see where we've been in the industry. Unless maybe you are working in couture, the primary tool is that you're using to communicate your collections is the 2D flat sketch. Could be done by hand, usually done in a vector program like Adobe Illustrator, but it's not to scale. One viewpoint. If you want the back view of a garment, that's an additional sketch. If you want the side view, that's an additional sketch. It's not really interoperable with any other applications except as a 2D asset. So this is the primary tool that is used to communicate between technical developers, also in merchandising assortments. The one thing I think you can do with it is you can add print pattern and color to it, and again, as a merchandising tool. Again, this is not to scale. So this is where we've been. And if you've been in the fashion industry, you're very familiar with working this way. And it's interesting because most designers who come out of fashion school, they spend their time in fashion school, hands-on sewing, making patterns, and then they enter the industry, never touch a sewing machine, never make patterns unless they specifically go into, you know, technical design, or they're working, say, like in couture, right? So this is where we've been. Where we're going is 3D modeling. So this is correct scale and it's pattern driven. So when I say correct scale, what I mean is if the body length of this shirt is 75 centimeters, that means that the model you're looking at now is 75 centimeters in length. So it is correct scale and it's pattern driven, which is very important. Limitless viewpoints. With a 3D model of a garment, I could turn this garment and in the programs that I'm using, have a virtual photo studio and take, you know, photo renderings at any angle. It's also interoperable with many software applications, which I'm going to elaborate on, right? So in summary, 3D design for fashion, it's creating virtual prototype garments using 3D modeling software that is pattern driven with applied physics, specifically gravity and collision, and soft material simulation. So I highlighted pattern driven because this is what distinguishes software like Clo3D, Browseware, Optitex from other 3D modeling tools, in that it is really driven by the garment pattern. So the garment pattern is both an input and can always be an output of these software applications. So 3D design is workflow hub. Currently in the industry, there are silos. You have technical developers who are essentially your pattern makers. You have design using communicating through flat sketches, and then you have marketing and communications. And this is just a really high level overview, but you have these work streams working in silos, and really the only time they come together is when you have garment samples, prototypes. That's how technical developers and designers talk to each other. It's through prototypes, it's through garment fittings. If you move to 3D, the 3D file becomes the hub of your process. It allows technical developers and designers to be able to really speak the same language and work in a much more integrated workflow, as well as working with marketing and communications for, you know, merchandising tools, sales tools. And going back, the reason I present this is I think in the industry, there's a general feeling around 3D tools that there's an agreement that this is where we're moving, but there's also a feeling that this is an added layer of complexity. And I'm showing this change in workflow because really you can streamline your workflow with 3D tools. It's not an added layer of complexity. So then the real topic here is 3D design as creative catalyst. So how do you go from this? And my entry into 3D design was really from as a, you know, a technical design solution. So how do you go from this to something like this, where you're really harnessing 3D design to have creative fashion storytelling? And it really is about the interoperability of 3D files. Interoperability is a word, I think, in one of the Meta seminars, Mark Zuckerberg used that word 100 times, but that really is the key here, in that for so many applications, the 3D file really is the starting point. And the 3D files then can be exported and imported into render engines, like architectural rendering engines, for technical design, applications for visual merchandising, post photo editing, motion graphics, animation, gaming and virtual reality, and augmented reality applications. And there's even more that I'm not showing here. So I'm going to just show some examples of how this is used. So post photo editing. This is the work of Justin Riddler that him and his team did for Vogue China. And what you're looking at here is a blend of the virtual and the real, the physical and the digital. So the models exist, but the garments that they are wearing are totally digital, totally virtual. And again, this is done through shooting models with green screen backgrounds. And it's a blend of 3D design tools as well as tools like Photoshop. And on the Instagram for Vogue China, they actually show some behind the scenes videos of the designers using what looks like Clo 3D to create the looks that they're showing in this issue. Another artist working in this area is Timothy Clay, who, again, what you're looking at here are real models, but then everything else is digital, everything else is virtual. And it's just seamlessly blending the real and the unreal, the physical and the digital. Virtual reality and gaming, which I'm putting together because whether you're accessing the environment through virtual reality headsets or just a desktop interface, it really is about that virtual environment. This is something I created for California College of the Arts, where I teach. So a couple of years ago, we were in pandemic lockdown. Typically, we end the school year with a fashion show for the graduating seniors. Because of lockdown restrictions, we couldn't do that. So we created a virtual reality environment, and every student had one kind of virtual exhibition space where they could show their garments on mannequins, along with any sort of images from their lookbooks, or mood boards, anything they wanted to put in this space. And if you accessed it either through virtual reality headset or just through the desktop interface, you could walk around and see the entire senior graduating class, see their work for the year. And it was a blend of work that was rendered in either Clo 3D or photogrammetry 3D scans of actual garments that they did. And then here's an example of a video game, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, where the garments created for all the characters, they're using, in this case, Marvelous Designer, which is the same parent company as Clo 3D. It's more or less the same piece of software. Clo 3D has some added features specifically for apparel industry applications, but the essence of it is the same. Animation. So this is really what I do. The short form video format is kind of how I work. These are a couple examples. The animation on the left, I actually used Julian Roberts' subtraction cutting method to design that dress. I recommend looking up Julian Roberts. It's a very interesting technique for designing clothing. And these are, again, short form videos. And the still images are also from videos. The middle image is something that I did for an image for, or a video for a footwear brand. And this is, again, I uses a handful of different software, but it really starts with something like Clo 3D. This is a student at CCA who really works effortlessly between digital tools and physical tools. And again, showing animated presentation for one of her projects. But again, moving between draping fabric on a dress form, traditional sketching techniques with pen and ink, but then also using Clo 3D software and just moving back and forth between the digital and the physical to make her her collections manifest. Then augmented reality. So this is really what I'm about to show you is just kind of the very tip. It's like the snowflake on top of an iceberg, because when I hand it over to Christie, what they're doing is like so beyond what I'm about to show you here. This is what I did for Digital Fashion Week, New York, in fall of 2021. They had a digital fashion trail, and it was powered by the Ventana platform. So a number of designers submitted their designs to be augmented reality features that could then either be triggered through a QR code online, or by actually going to the places in New York City to find the QR codes and see the AR garments in place. These are just 4 out of the collection that I did, and I was playing around with this in Golden Gate Park here in San Francisco, where I live. And here's another example of an augmented reality application. There's a number of brands out there, 010, as well as DressX, to name just 2, who are doing augmented reality fashion platforms. And this is one piece that I did for 010 back in February. And that's actually, fashion storytelling. So these are just a few artists that I really like, really working in the area of digital fashion storytelling. Of course, Nick Knight is an innovator in fashion photography and truly an icon. And this is a project that he did with his show studio, where they digitized the model Giselle, who goes by the Instagram name Ugly Worldwide, and then partnered with a handful of designers who submitted digital garments and digital creations. And then the show studio team actually mixed and matched different elements from all the designers to create a wide array of different looks. So these are just a few. It's really amazing work. This is a duo, a Dutch duo. They go by the name Undercover Banana and Space Monkey. Again, like really amazing, surreal work here in fashion storytelling, really elevating the craft. 2 well-known designers here. On the left is Josh Jen, and then on the right is Anthony Tudisco, who's one of the more well-known people working in this space. And I believe this is some work done for Balenciaga. So again, this is just a sampling of what people are doing in the kind of digital fashion storytelling space. So yeah, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christie Lau, who's going to show you what they do with these applications.
Thanks for sharing that, Tony. That was really great to sort of the way that you've talked about 3D and how that could really streamline the fashion process, and especially on the production side. I'll just like start my presentation now. But hi, my name is Christie. I'm an XR artist, and I've recently graduated from Central St. Martin's BA fashion program. So I graduated last year, and this was my final collection. So for my final collection, I had these 3 QR code cubes that went down the runway, and when you scan them, it takes you to an augmented reality filter, like an Instagram filter that shows a digital human wearing my digital garments. And yeah, no, it became kind of like a viral thing on the internet for a little bit. But the idea sort of behind this whole collection was just completely taking fashion off the physical body and placing it on like digital ones. So beyond this show augmented reality filter that I had on the runway, I further developed these looks so that they could be worn as like a try-on filter. And I set up during my end of year exhibition with Unreal Engine. And so I had this augmented reality try-on booth, but also I had these characters that were wearing my garments and design within a digital environment. So these are like 3 looks, and they're all running in Unreal Engine, which is a game engine, and visitors can come in and put on a VR headset and really experience the space. So yeah, this was my final year project. I think Tony earlier on covered some tools for creating digital fashion. And I find that within my own workflows, Clo is the one that that was like the gateway program for me to get into the digital making. But beyond that, I use like various 3D softwares for 3D modeling and texturing to go through all these different steps that takes me from making the garment to the augmented reality filter or the game ready asset that you see earlier. And so my process would be to drape a shape in Clo 3D. And I would simulate the garments and play around with gravity settings. So I think for this, for my final collection, I was simulating everything with like 0 gravity or like reverse gravity, so I could get some like really out there shapes. And then after that, I go on to retopology, which just means that you're optimizing these digital assets so that they work better in real time, especially within augmented reality. You're limited to how many points or like vertices that you can have on your 3D shape that is your garment. I then bring it into texturing to like apply the patterns on my garments. And then I attach skeleton, which basically allows it to move with the body. And then I put it into Unreal Engine or AR. So after graduation, I had the great opportunity to work with Meta on their Queens of the Metaverse campaign, of which 3 designers were paired with 3 drag performers to create a one-of-a-kind phygital look for that was performed live. So for this project, I was paired with Drag King Adamal, and I was tasked to design a look that has like a physical component, which was the stage outfit that you see him in, but also to design the augmented reality aspect of the piece. So on stage, there was the physical outfit that was worn by Adam, but on the screens behind him, they were running AR try-on with the Instagram AR filter with the augmented reality component that goes with the look. That was a really fun project to work on. And like one instance of how you can apply the physical with the digital to create like a phygital experience. And after graduation, I've cleaned up my collection pieces, and so I've taken some pieces and added some new ones in, and I have my own digital collection that is on the DressX platform. And for those of you who don't know what DressX is, they're a digital fashion platform, and they sell a try-on service. And so you have brands that have their digital only goods, but also, you know, independent digital fashion designers like myself having their designs on their website, and they do a photo fitting service of which you submit an image of yourself to them and they'll fit the garment to you. So that's my collection that's currently on DressX. And I mean, like, beyond augmented reality, what I really enjoy is the world building aspect around creating digital garments. I believe that my digital garments should be in its own world, worn by humans or maybe like post-human beings. And so I try to create that and reference that within my work. But yeah, so I would build all these environments as well as the garments themselves. And yeah, no, for this puffer jacket, it was taking the actual YouTube footage of the QR codes and applying that as the texture on the puffer jacket in a weird sort of feedback loop kind of way. I'm just going to show some work that I've done for clients before. So this was a designer that was based in Hong Kong, and he's given me some sketches of what his garments were like, and he wanted me to do like a digital rendition of it. And we had a lot of fun creating our own avatar character. His whole collection was based off manta rays, and so we had this idea to create this character that has this like lashes and horns that's kind of referencing the shapes of like manta rays. And I recreated one of his outfits in digital space and had it in like an animation where it's floating around in the water with all these other manta rays. Yeah. And most recently, I've just made a short fashion film that was showcased at Artsec Gallery during London Fashion Week, where I've created 3 different looks, kind of inspired by post-human theory, and also like looking into like the idea of like a cyborg, and like the vision was combining like organic flesh with cables and like these tools of digital making. And this was my latest piece that I showcased. But yeah, to create the footage, the film that you've seen earlier, I use Unreal Engine. I use that a lot within my workflows because it is incredibly powerful. As a game engine, you can have video texture streaming, and they have a very well built-in human character builder, of which I use that to sort of create my own humans. Or so this is one of the examples of the characters that I made, where I've like completely switched out the textures and switched out the body to create my own vision of a post-human body. But yeah, no, I just wanted to cover like at the end the different softwares or programs that I use. So typically for my workflows for avatars, I use MetaHuman Creator, which runs in Unreal Engine, just because they just have a really incredible like face rig, and the body rig is also really good to work with, and fully customizable. You can scan your own face in and build up your own self in the game engine. For digital fashion, I use Clo3D to create my garments. Within VR, I sometimes use Gravity Sketch. I find that with creating using VR is just a lot more intuitive than making through 3D modeling used on like a screen with like traditional 3D modeling software. But I mean, I also use 3D modeling software such as Blender, Maya, ZBrush, more for sculpting and details. And then for texturing, I use Substance Painter. Throughout my work, I also incorporate AI within my processes as well. Lately, I've been using a lot of Midjourney AI, especially within like visualizing different concepts. And then for AR, I use Spark AR, which is for Instagram, and Effect House, which is for TikTok, as well as Lens Studio, which is powered by Snapchat. And for some of the rendered videos that you've seen earlier, all of that was put together in a game engine called Unreal Engine. But yeah, that's all my work that in my processes. So I'm going to stop my screen share now. Yeah.
That was amazing, both of you. I'm curious, couple of questions that I thought of, and we're open for Q&A, so please, chime in and ask anything you're interested about or curious about. For someone who is not in this world at all, and say you're a traditional fashion designer, but you want to start dabbling and playing with these, what would be the best way to start just experimenting? I know both of you are self-taught, so it's amazing to me that you went from design work to this whole other world. So what would be your advice or recommendation on where someone could start if they just want to start experimenting and playing?
Well, first I want to address that the word self-taught. It's interesting because things move so quickly. I think at this point, 95% of what most people do, it ends up being self-taught. Because like I know, like when I went to school, like most of what I do didn't even exist at that time. So I think we all, to some extent, I actually am lucky in that my introduction to Clo3D was at a large corporation where I was working. And so we actually had the Clo3D team come in and like teach us how to use Clo3D. But there's so many online tutorials and everything. I'd say my advice, if your background is fashion and garment design, something like Clo3D or Browseware are great entryways into 3D. And then my next recommendation is Blender 3D, because I know, like, my background is apparel. It's not 3D industrial design or digital design. And when I wanted to kind of like grow beyond just Clo3D, I didn't know where to go. And it's because a lot of software applications have really good marketing teams. So everyone bills themselves as a one-stop shop. Not really the case. Like each software application has its specialty. So Keyshot, amazing piece of software, not really the right fit for me, but I bought a license for it in the beginning and was trying to use Keyshot because I read an interview with a designer, well-known designer who works in Clo3D, and he was sponsored by Keyshot. I, did classes in Rhino, and again, this is the standard for industrial design, but not the right fit for me. Blender is open source, meaning free, and it really like exposes you to many aspects of the 3D process. There's elements that are similar to ZBrush in Blender. There are elements that are similar to substance design that are in Blender. Working with render engines, like working in cycles in Blender can help you if you then move to Cinema 4D and you're using Octane, for example. So Blender, by being open source and also having a lot of resources online, that would be my recommendation to start.
And these
Yeah.
require a membership or a purchase of a license, correct? Is that how they work?
Clo does, Blender is open source.
Okay. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Christy, you use multiple different platforms. How did you figure out how to use, there's so many different tools that you use, but then you pull them all together to create your work. How did you go about even figuring all of that out? Like, that's so impressive. And as it sounds, yeah, just like one does texture, one does, more illustrations. So
it's just sort of like it builds up over time. I think like definitely my start into 3D was like Blender and like Clo 3D. I think it was like lockdown when I got into 3D stuff. And before that I was testing out some photogrammetry things. So like 3D scanning and then like trying to bring something like real into the digital and being like, whoa. But I think like Clo 3D was like a very good base to build off of, especially from like a fashion background, because like we work with our hands and like you understand shapes through like you physically slicing through the pattern and like expanding it from there. But as far as like all the different programs I ended up using, it's just because you'd find like one program doesn't export something in a certain way, or it's too limiting to in terms of for the texture that I want to do. But I think, I really think that like with VR, you can actually make a lot of things without any prior knowledge of knowing how to operate within a 3D workspace. I think definitely there is like an initial sort of learning curve to 3D, getting used to interacting in like a 3D space or building in 3D space through like a 2D interface of your screen. But it definitely, like once you learn one, like the other softwares get a lot easier to learn, just it's quite similar. But I mean, I think so far it's like Unreal Engine has been the most difficult to learn, but also it's just incredibly powerful and it's a really powerful tool. You could build games or anything on there. So yeah.
yeah, that's
Can I
great.
share a quick anecdote about when we were in lockdown, we at CCA could not do an in-person fashion show, and at that time I had only just started teaching Clo 3D, and so out of that graduating class, I think only 4 students had gone through my Clo 3D class. So we were really like, what are we gonna do? And this is I think we were actually talking about this in fall of 2020, but it was really the bulk of the work was spring of 2021. And Christie, who I didn't know at the time, had done a photogrammetry scan of themselves and did like this looping video that they posted on Instagram. And I saw that and I was like blown away. And I showed that post to the fashion chair and I was like, this is how we do it. And that kind of led to like, okay, let's figure out what 3D scanning app are we going to use. And all the students had left San Francisco. Classes had gone totally virtual, so they were all over the globe. So we managed to figure out a way for them all remotely to do 3D scans of their work in where they were living, and that's what we used for the assets for that virtual reality environment, which also had AR features as well. You could trigger the looks through a filter and view them and interact with them that way. So yeah, I just wanted to share that about that one post that Christie did totally sparked all these ideas.
This is when I wasn't even that good at like 3D. It was just, very initially like experimenting with using stuff in the digital realm.
Yeah, but that worked out because
Yeah.
anybody, if you've ever worked with a 3D scanning app, they tend to be glitchy.
Mm.
And the thing that you posted had a lot of glitches in it. And I was saying like the glitches make it cool. Like, and I kept showing like that post, like this looks awesome. Like this, the glitches and little, the holes and everything else, like that actually it's a feature, not a bug. It makes it look really interesting.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. I do have a question here for both presenters. What specific short-term or immediate-term pathways do you see for monetizing these technologies for talented, creative, and independent creatives?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Good
I
question.
mean, I can only answer like in terms of like my experience, I guess. So I mean, I freelance 3D like in digital fashion and like AR, and so I guess, I mean, I would just like send emails to brands to be like, hi, do you want any, like, would you be interested in having like some of your looks digitized or showcased through like digital render? So that's like one way. I also like teach a little bit on the side, like, especially currently in this space, like with everyone's really interested in 3D. That's also like something that I do. Um, yeah, yeah.
This is becoming more and more important for the future, right? So
Yeah.
how do you feel about
Yeah.
a, traditional fashion industry person incorporating this into either their brand or their personal work? Like, how important is it to have this knowledge and be able to kind of get that into your work?
Well, I can speak to that because in addition to my work, I've also done consulting work on implementing 3D software at different brands, and at previous positions I've held with brands, I've led, initiatives and pilot projects to bring 3D tools into the design workflow. So there's definitely a revolution happening right now with a lot of designers upskilling and learning, tools like Clo3D and Browseware, which again, I love them because they bring the designer back to like, I think what is intrinsic to garment design rather than like once you start working with Clo3D and Browseware, you see like flat sketches is like really this kind of abstract workflow. And I will say I was working for Levi Strauss and we had started using 3D tools as part of an initiative that I led. But of course, one of the issues that you have when you introduce new tools is you don't necessarily have the pool of talent who are skilled in using those. So I literally went on LinkedIn, typed in Clo3D San Francisco, 2 people came up. And so we hired one of them as, a freelance contractor to come in and do Clo3D work. But that was 2018. So I think it's really caught on with a lot of brands. So that's kind of the traditional fashion route. But then there are a number of ways. I mean, again, this is I've done work for, creating music videos, and I think there's so many different avenues you can pursue. Being a videographer who uses digital tools as a big part of your workflow, or as well as working with traditional fashion brands. So while brands are starting to upskill and go through this 3D revolution, they are really looking for people who are skilled in Clo3D and Browseware and other 3D rendering applications.
And from a sustainability aspect, when you're working in these programs and designing something through these methods, you're obviously, you're saving time, you're saving iterations of sewn garments. And I think for the creative person, you're getting a much better visual understanding of how the garment is laying on the body instead of with flat sketching. You can't you know, you're not going to see the drape and how it's laying on the body. So this is, you know, great for the designer to get a better visual of their design, then saving time in patterns and fittings and fabric and all of that. So it's a great, you know, way of the future for things to be more sustainable and more less time, less money, less iterations back and forth.
And for small businesses, I had a small brand that I unfortunately shut down because of the pandemic. But it was basically a one-person operation, but I did work with a few contractors. And typically, you know, if you design a style, you go through several rounds of prototype garments to get the fit right before you actually go into creating a commercial sample. But I use Clo 3D, and I was able to do it with one prototype. I was able to do one prototype, make any adjustments, and apply those to the commercial sample, and then go straight into my production. And so that like saves so much time and so much money that I didn't have working as a very small independent brand. So there's a lot of, you know, there's solutions, or it solves a lot of problems at a lot of different scales. From a small business, it's invaluable. Larger business, like anybody who's worked at a large fashion brand knows the amount of commercial samples that are created every season. And, you know, something like the digital tools using Browseware or Clo 3D cuts down on a significant percentage of that.
Mm. Yeah. Tony, so you have your to.mu.lab. Now, what do you do with that? Is that services that you offer in design and in the 3D space, or can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so, you know, it's both my like kind of creative facing, where I just do my own, you know, personal projects, as well as I'll do different marketing assets for brands, creating short videos, or again, creative consulting for 3D strategy, or just, you know, helping to create 3D assortments. So brands might work with me to transition from, you know, using flat sketches to using 3D assets. So really the to.mu.lab, that's sort of the facing of what I do. Then a lot of, you know, I've shown in a number of exhibitions. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, I urge everyone to go to Vancouver and to the Vancouver Art Gallery and check out Fashion Fictions before it closes. I think it closes like October 9th. It's an amazing show. It's one of the best curated fashion exhibitions I've ever seen. And I feel really, really lucky to be a part of it. And they have, they cover every, Rick Owens is in it, Junya Watanabe, and then a lot of like host of like new innovators in the space. It's really an amazing show. And if you can't make it to Vancouver, and it sounds like I work for them, I totally don't. I urge you to like buy the book, because it's really, really great. But yeah, that's one that I'm participating in. I was in an exhibition in the Netherlands at the Design Museum Den Bosch as well. So yeah, it's pretty much an overview of what I do with my studio.
Yeah, and Christie, for you and your work, you offer consulting and you're doing freelancing, correct?
Exactly, like making freelancing in like 3D and like digital fashion. I mean, like, because I also make like digital wearables as well, so that could be like part of everything. I also have my own artistic practice, of which I'm sort of exploring like creating, you know, digital bodies, and like creating a whole narrative around digital world building and post-humanism. And so that's my own artistic practice. But yeah, so I kind of do mix of different things. But yeah.
Do you see yourself doing anything with like typical, I guess you call it typical fashion design, since you studied that in school, was fashion and print, but you've completely kind of moved over into this other space?
I think the print element still comes back because within a lot of my designs, I use a lot of like video textures. And so it's just kind of like print, but it's moving and it's not static. And I have that within like my digital wearables, say for example, like my collection on DressX, or even with it, like you can experience yourself as well in the try-on apps because they would have like an animated material. So I think it still lives in
Buy it. Yeah.
the fashion education still lives on. But I mean, at the moment, I'm still very much enjoying the digital world building aspect, creating the whole vision of not just like the garments, but like the world and the character and the storyline behind everything. But you know, with the right opportunity, I might go back into making something physical again, mixed with digital. You know, I think digital is kind of the buzzword at the moment. Everyone's trying to figure out how to combine the two into a unique experience. So yeah, there's plenty of exciting opportunities in that.
I love the idea of the storytelling behind both of your works and what they do, because storytelling is such a big part of just any creative endeavor, and bringing that to life in this manner is so exciting and really fun to see. Do either of you or both of you have any advice, again, you know, before we wrap things up, any advice for people that just want to get into this space, or just from your experience, do's and don'ts, I don't know, things that you would advise or recommend for someone to just kind of start getting into this space?
Honestly, it's just a lot of YouTube, I think. I mean, I think I get into the whole 3D thing through Blender, and one of the series that I really enjoyed was called Lazy Tutorials by this VFX artist called Ian Hubert, of which he just really quickly breaks down how he makes something like, you know, from particle effect like moths, which was something that inspired like the houndstooth piece in my collection because it was supposed to be like flapping moths. But anyway, he does a whole great series about how to create these different like effects and like 3D things in Blender. And so I would say that's pretty good to check out.
Yeah, YouTube is fantastic for
Yeah.
all kinds of online learning. We do have another question that came up. So what about the knitwear and direct to fabric? Both of those take digital designs and make them actual garments. Have you considered 3D knitting with systems, Stole and Shima Seki / whole garment? You familiar with those?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Stoll and Shimaseki, and I actually worked a lot when I was working full-time in the industry with, well, you know, working in the apparel industry, did a lot with Shimaseki. I would say Stoll, if you could learn Stoll, that's what's powering Flyknit sneakers. Nike will hire you right away if you have experience setting up Stoll machines. Yeah, it's actually when I was teaching Clo 3D, or when I teach Clo 3D, one of the projects that I have the students do is the idea of the no waste garment. And typically that's a whole subject, more or less kind of in the academic area, but it's kind of popular around no waste garments. And usually it's around how you can create a pattern from a rectilinear woven fabric that is no waste. But I approach it from kind of a different angle of, if you are doing something that's fully fashioned, like using like a Shimaseki machine, how could you design that? And I don't know if any of you have seen Shimaseki machines in action, but they basically create complete garments. I was at Premier Vision, and I remember they set up a booth and they were basically creating, and it's about as fast as a slow printer. I would say, like, it would knit up a glove, and it took maybe, I don't know, a few minutes for this glove to come out. And then the person would put on a glove and put in one of those coin-shaped batteries, and the glove had and I had some like wearable features because some of the yarns were conductive. So it's really amazing. And this is all done with Shimaseki machines. And again, that it's these many knitting machines are what are fueling, you know, the Adidas, Nike sneakers that are using those techniques with like Flyknit. But of course, all sneaker brands have been doing that for a few years now. So yeah, I have considered it. I recommend learning that if you have the opportunity. I know RISD has, I believe they work with Stoll, and the chair of the fashion department at CCA came from Parsons, and he said that when they got a Stoll machine, there was so much interest in students learning it that they actually had to create a lottery for registration for that class. Because again, everybody knows that if they learn that, it's like almost a guaranteed job with Nike or, you know, another brand straight out of college. So yeah.
Fantastic. So we are out of time, and I want to thank everyone for coming. Tony and Christie, thank you for presenting today. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to find you? Websites or?
I'm on Instagram. Yeah.
Instagram.
Instagram at lau_Christie. Alternatively, people can email me as well. I get back at contact@lauchristie.com. So yeah, Instagram, email.
Okay. Tony?
Yeah, Instagram for me as well. I've got a website and I have like a Behance portfolio, but honestly, Instagram is like real time. Like as I do work, I post it, and it's probably the easiest way to contact me. So I'm to.mu.lab, to.mu.lab. So I'm to.mu.lab on Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of World Collective, thank you both for presenting your exciting work, and thank you for everyone attending. And we will see you on the next one.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.